Do you actually have to be on cocaine to be on this podcast?
It's a great day to be a Wildcat!
Durfing.
What's up, everybody? You're listening to yet another edition of Cocaine Willie. I'm your commissioner, Bob Trollsby, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the good chef Andre Napier, and Fireball Matt, who is back this week to help us preview the University of Houston Cougars matchup. But tonight, we've got that matchup, which is the homecoming game for Kansas State against Houston this Saturday. It's an 11 a.m. kick in the Little Apple. K-State is coming off of a 41-3 drubbing of TCU, and Houston is coming off of an absolute ref job, I'll put it that way, in their home stadium against the Texas Longhorns. And who better to help us preview the matchup against Houston than Ryan Monceaux from GoCougs.com, the trusted voice of Houston Cougars fans. Your website. Ryan, how are you doing tonight?
I am great. Trusted voice. Listen.
You are.
We're good.
The voice is here. I mean, to get this kicked off, get this started, Houston this season has tended more or less toward the bottom of the conference in their first year in the Big 12. And Dana Holgerson's seat seemed to be one of the warmer ones in the league coming into the season when the season began. Houston's now 3-4, with all four of their losses coming against former Southwest Conference rivals, including Rice. But Houston seems from the outside to be on a bit of an uptick after becoming the first of the newcomers to beat an incumbent Big 12 team in a massive but also wildly strange victory against the West Virginia Mountaineers 2 weeks ago, and also playing a very, very competitive game against the Texas Longhorns this past week. So the question is, what's the vibe check on the Houston program at this point of the season with some of the high highs that you've had and some of the lower lows that you've had?
It has been a fully Dana Holgerson kind of year, right? I mean, just weird stuff happens. And this year has been the Rice game you thought would be the lowest you could ever get. And then the Texas issues with the spots and everything was pretty bad. There's a lot of moral victory going right now in a vibe. But I personally think U of H is starting to play a little better. And it's not to a level where you can compete on the road in the Big 12, but for the first time in a while, it feels like things are trending the right way. Now, that could go all to hell at 11:15 Saturday morning, but, you know, we have at least until then.
I mean, speaking of the last couple of games, obviously the West Virginia game was one that on that Thursday night, a lot of people were wondering how the team's performance was going to be, especially with Dana Holgerson going up against the school that formerly employed him. But then the Texas game, I mean, being down 21-0 and coming back and tying that game, are the recent results, do you think, a flash in the pan, or how much of the performance of those two games was really a motivational piece for Dana Holgerson and a motivational piece for, you know, playing an in-state school like the University of Texas? Or is it something that the last back half of the season, you think this performance is going to kind of stay where they're going to be competitive in the rest of their games?
I don't know. I don't think anybody else does either. West Virginia was a crazy emotional game. And in this state, playing Texas is not an in-state team. That's the evil empire. That is everything that's wrong in America right there in one little college. And so we talked about this on our show last night, and beating Texas A&M is a big deal. Beating Texas is in another stratosphere. And when you're down 21-0, you just think, all right, this is over. You know, let's just have a good time, good little crowd. And then they start chipping back, and Texas done some dumb stuff, and Quinn Ewers goes down. But that's also like you go down to basically the final play. And so you have two big emotional games in a row. And how are you ever going to – college kids don't get up for three emotional games in a row. And going on the road in an atmosphere – U of H has not left the state of Texas this year, all right? This will be game 8 and haven't left the state. So really the first big trip, homecoming in Manhattan, an 11 a.m. game, weird weather. I mean, it's all the things that could happen. Last year, U of H had a huge emotional game in the first game, a 3 overtime game. Then they go to Texas Tech, and Donovan Smith, who's now U of H's quarterback, converts a crazy 4th and 20 play in the fourth quarter to get to overtime, and Tech wins in overtime. So you have two crazy emotional games, and then Kansas comes to Houston in week 3, and U of H went up 14-0, and you thought, wow, they were really – and then it ended up like 48-28 or something like that. You just can't sustain it 3 games in a row. That's just always been my belief, and maybe they proved me wrong, but this is going to be the hardest week to get players' attention in practice. Like, coming off of that, when everybody's telling you got screwed, I mean, everybody in their lives, how do you get their focus back? And that's going to be – I asked Dana this in his press conference today, and he was just like, I don't know. It's a Big 12. You got to go do it.
Well, the guy that's going to lead you into battle, it's a guy that's familiar to Kansas State. I mean, coming from Texas Tech, like you mentioned, Donovan Smith. He's second behind Dylan Gabriel in almost all the passing categories in the Big 12, 16 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. That's nothing to sneeze at. Donovan's been leading this team from the very beginning. How much of the success that Houston has is all predicated on him, or, what success? I mean, offensively, you guys are balling out of control, kind of.
The numbers are good, but the scoring is not. You're like 70th in the country in scoring, right around 29 points a game. You would think with the numbers Donovan has put up, the scoring would be better. They figured out, it took a few games through maybe the TCU game to figure out what Donovan was good at and to start tailoring things to that. And in the first half of Texas Tech and in the 3 games since, you've seen a better Donovan Smith. He's starting to put numbers up, starting to get things together. Receivers are playing better as a group. But I think he's a different quarterback than he was at Texas Tech. And you're going to see some ups and downs, and there were downs in a Tech game. You're down 21-0. You went 3 and out 3 of the first 4 times, I think. He had 2 bad second half turnovers. 1 bad. One was just a really good play by a linebacker. I think he has performed better than my expectations going into the year. And he's certainly not the reason you're 3 and 4. There have been issues, but I don't think you can blame any of that on him.
Certainly. And Dana Holgorsen, so to bring it back to the guy, the I guess the cult of personality of Dana, if you will. He's been a Mike Leach, Hal Mummy disciple really for his entire career, starting at
since Iowa Wesleyan, yeah.
And then followed the Pirates of Valdosta State, and then later on at Texas Tech as an assistant. But Houston's 5th in the conference in offensive efficiency. But to your point, they only have the 28.8 points per game. I mean, when we look at Holgorsen, when we look at that air raid scheme, which we're very familiar with from playing against it at West Virginia for 7 or 8 years when he was there, what do you view as some of the strengths of his scheme, and what do you view as maybe some of those weaknesses? And how does his scheme here at Houston differ from what he ran at West Virginia, if at all?
So he calls it evolving. Dana was the offensive coordinator. He left Texas Tech before the 2008 season, came to Houston with Kevin Sumlin, and was allowed to call plays. That's why he left Tech. He didn't call plays there. He got to call plays at Houston. And the guy that was here 15 years ago and the guy that you see now is night and day. It's Bill Snyder to the air raid, basically. I mean, that's how wild the transformation has been. And I mean, you would throw for 550, 600 yards a game in those 2 seasons he was here. And then he went to Oklahoma State as the OC and had a pretty good year, and that's when he went to West Virginia. He has gone further and further away from air raid. There's still concepts. They're still running the same sort of routes, but it's not that same sort of game. Now, they are going more 4 and 5 wide with 4 receivers and a tight end kind of split out as a flanker. And it's starting to look a little more like that, but certainly not the tempo, not the way you call plays. You all just experienced Kendall Briles. That didn't look like Kendall Briles that U of H knew. Kendall played at U of H and then was the offensive coordinator for a year in 2018. And that what Kendall did here in 2018 looked more like the air raid as we know it. Obviously, y'all didn't get that same experience last weekend, but yeah. So Dana's kind of evolved. What you see now is certainly he calls it ball control, but it's. I mean, if you can't convert a third down, is it really ball control? So I can't really quantify what exactly that offense is today, but it's certainly different than what you saw 5 or 10 years ago.
But to just piggyback on that, I mean, I want to know where's the running game at? Because, you know, in that Texas game, obviously Texas is pretty stout up front, but you know, for a ball control offense, as even if you're going 5 wide, you got to sprinkle in some run game, you would think.
Yeah. So Dana admitted today that they knew they weren't going to run on UT, and they didn't really even try. I think the running backs had 6 carries in the first 3 quarters, and then 6 more in the fourth quarter, and that was basically the last drive. You're trying to kind of run the clock out, score, and then go for 2, and that's the game. Not give UT any time. They just really abandoned it completely in that game. He has been more adamant about running the ball this year, and he keeps telling the media, basically like he's telling himself, that we're committed to the run. We're committed to the run. And sometimes hard-headedly so. You have a freshman running back, true freshman, named Parker Jenkins, who's starting to separate himself from the other running backs, but he's still young. I mean, he was at prom 4 months ago, so 5 months ago. So the running game is kind of week to week. Dana's game plans do not resemble each other from week to week, and some people think that's an asset. Some people think that's not. To this point, it really hasn't been. But we'll see.
So you mentioned
it sucks to have a guy come on and have no answers for you, right? But that's really where we're at this point.
That was an answer for me. That was definitely an answer for me. Because when I look at it, it's clearly not there. But you know, like you said, he wants to run the ball. And you said it. He's trying to convince himself that he wants to run the ball, but it's just not happening. And I get it for the UT game, but every other game, it just seems like they have the athletes that just don't do it.
A lot of that's offensive line. The left side of the offensive line is not bad. You've got a really good left tackle, but, you know, kind of everybody has a really good left tackle. The left guard is pretty good. The right side is a weakness. And so you just don't have a lot of options. Dana really doesn't like to run the ball to the outside, which we've seen for 5 years, and it's maddening at times. But that's just, I mean, it is who he is. Overall, you're running before Texas, it was like 130 yards a game, which is not great, but where it had been, that's actually pretty good. But it's not like what y'all did against TCU and what Avery Johnson did a couple weeks ago with the 5 touchdowns. Dana today had more. First off, it was like his best press conference ever. He just was open and honest.
I wanted to
And
talk
his
about that.
admiration for what he said about Kansas State was, I mean,
Yeah.
every coach talks everybody up, but he was like in awe of the running game at Kansas State. And obviously, that's recency bias. He was watching game film from this week, right? And is like, oh shit, here we go. All right. I can say oh shit on Cocaine Willie's podcast, right? Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
Hell yeah,
I didn't
brother.
want to go over the line. But yeah, he seemed really impressed with what he's got or what y'all have, and we'll see.
Yeah, so you bring up Parker Jenkins. Who are some of the other skill position players on offense that K-State fans need to look out for? Because our secondary has been playing a lot better as of late, and they're probably going to be some pretty good matchups there.
Yeah, so you've got, I would say, 4 receivers to really not maybe focus on, but 4 guys that can beat you. Number 2, Matthew Golden, is an elite receiver. He struggled early in the year with drops. He's figured it out. His technique has changed. He's going and getting the ball with his hands rather than letting it come to him. Joseph Manjack the fourth. Number 0 is a transfer from USC. He's from Houston, but he has that Southern California vibe that you never know what you're going to get with him. But he's a really good possession receiver. There's another guy, Sammy Brown, who was at West Virginia. He's number 4. Sammy has had a breakout year, and there is a redshirt freshman walk-on named Dalton Carnes. He's number 85. He's a 5'9" white kid. It does not look from the outside like he has any special powers, except he wears the most enormous white gloves you've ever seen. It's basically the size of his entire upper body, these huge, like, hamburger helper gloves. But he's gone and forced a team that is wide receiver heavy to play him because he just goes and makes plays, and he shows up every day at practice, and when they throw the ball to him, he catches it. And he burned Texas Tech early in the game for a touchdown, and I think he made 5 catches against Texas, and just going underneath, doing whatever needed to be done. So there's 4 or 5 guys that can hurt you. Donovan is not – last year and the year before, U of H was really focused on one guy, Tank Dell, who's now with the Houston Texans. And basically 40% of the time you knew U of H was throwing to him. And he still caught a lot. But now it's not that offense. It's spread it out. You find the guy that's open. You go to your reads, and it's different.
I want to talk a little bit about the defensive side of the football. So Houston,
My deal with y'all was that I did not talk about anything that U of H is ranked 100 or worse in the country. So we can just skip defense.
Damn. Wow.
Actually, defense played really well for 3 quarters of the UT game.
Yeah.
It just happened to be after going down 21-0.
21-0. Yeah. I mean, I think our viewers, we just want to get a little bit of an idea as to what we might be going up against this weekend. So at least from a defensive efficiency perspective in the Big 12, Houston's 11th in the conference. And as you said, they've given up some points here in Big 12 play, averaging about 39 points a game. That being said, you do have some playmakers on the defensive side. Nelson Caesar, who's second in the conference in sacks. Malik Fleming, Isaiah Hamilton, ball getters, 3 interceptions for both of them. So they're fourth and fifth in the league in interceptions. Overall, can you give us a little bit of insight, I guess, schematically about the Houston defense, maybe some of the strengths, if there are any, but, some of the strengths or maybe some of the weak cogs in this defense?
So for almost 5 years, U of H has played 4 down linemen. And you focus on a bandit, an edge rusher, who's a guy that has had really great numbers. And U of H has put 4 guys into the NFL for a second round kind of thing. But last week they went to a 3-3. They dropped Caesar and especially Agüebu, who was at OU last year. You saw him. So they dropped them back into kind of more of a linebacker role off the line. Agüebu played linebacker at OU, and he had his best game at U of H when he kind of stepped back from the line. Is that what we're going to see against Kansas State? Dana wouldn't say. I think if they had success with it, they're probably going to go back to that well. But we just don't know. There's a linebacker that I am an absolute shill for, whose name is Jamal Morris. He transferred from OU, has gotten his life back together, went through some depression issues, some mental health struggles at OU, and transferred to Houston, had a baby, and has really devoted himself to his son and his sport. And he's just an awesome guy. And you're not going to get that in a game. You're not going to find that out. But he's a guy who has gone from a backup spot in the preseason to one of your best playmakers at linebacker. Y'all talked about Fleming, I believe, and Isaiah Hamilton. Hamilton was at Texas Southern FCS school last year. He's a guy that basically kind of got lost in the shuffle in recruiting during COVID. He was at a Houston area high school, a pretty significant high school, and just didn't get any offers. And he went to TSU thinking, I can go improve myself and go get a D1 offer. And he was able to do it. TSU is literally across the street from U of H. They're two of the weirdest, craziest, closest schools you'll ever see. And so it's more of a bend but don't break kind of defensive backfield. They did not give up a lot of I think they gave up one big play in the Texas game, which is significantly better than it had been against Tech and TCU. So it really depends on how that front looks and the pressure they get. Against Texas, there were only 3 TFLs, and they were all 3 sacks. And you can put a lot of that on Ewers, not necessarily that offensive line. So is this team able to get that pressure? One of the guys in the middle went down in the Texas game. Dana, after the game, called it a full body cramp, which I've never heard a coach call an injury in my entire life. And I asked him about it today, and he was like, yeah, we think he's going to be ready. A full body cramp to me sounds just like aging. Like, okay, that's just something that happens. But he got carted off. So it looked way more serious in the moment than what they're telling us now. If Caldwell is there, you have another nose tackle named Chidozie Nwankwo. And if you have the two of them, they could maybe give you something in the middle. But if you can't stop guys for loss, if you can't disrupt a series like that, it's going to be a long day.
Yeah, and it sounds like that guy that had the full body cramp, he's a massive human being. That's what
Yeah,
Dana,
I just can't stop. I hear full body cramp, and I'm just like, that's so dumb.
What is that? Just severe dehydration? I feel like it's just got to be severe dehydration. I've never.
It could be. I mean,
the guy's 350 pounds.
You deal with Houston Heat, and Saturday was kind of mild for what they dealt with for 6 months outdoors. So,
oh yeah,
I don't think that's it, but you never know how somebody's hydrated or prepared or whatever.
He must have taken a page out of Dana's playbook and was crushing Red Bulls before the game instead of water.
I'm also not allowed to talk about that.
No.
But yeah, the Red Bull's fine. It's the other stuff that we don't bring up.
Okay. Well, the next segment, we're going to get a little weird, Ryan.
All right.
It's our listener questions. Cocaine heads have spoken, and they want to know some things. Bob, you got the first one in here. I don't even know why you slipped it in here. I guess you could ask it yourself.
Well, I didn't know how many listener questions, if any, we were going to get. When I created the outline, we had posted the tweet, I think 4 hours prior to me creating this, and had no questions. And then we got like 6 questions that came in at the end of the day.
I like it.
My first question is, why is it Cougs with 2 O's? Where does that come from?
We also can't talk about that. There was a deficiency of spelling in Texas in the 40s and 50s, and I don't 100% know where that comes from. It's been there forever, and you can always tell when somebody is knowledgeable from Texas or knowledgeable about U of H, because do they do the U, do they do the O? Our website, gocougs.com, see down there, it's 2 O's. If you go to gocougs.com with a U, you go to BYU's apparel website. Don't do that. I don't make any money off of that. Go to the one with the 2 O's.
Absolutely.
It's a good question. I'm a history guy, and we write a lot about U of H history, but I don't have an answer to this one, and I'm a little embarrassed by that.
Well, you mentioned Go Cougs, the other one with the U that would get you to a BYU website, which don't visit, don't go there. The BYU weird rivalry that it's asked about from Zach Zumwalt. Love that name. He asks, could the rivalry between Houston and BYU have the loser go as known as the MILFs for the rest of the regular season, which would be awesome.
Why did the loser have to be known as the MILF?
I know, the winner.
I wouldn't want to be known as the MILFs. No.
What?
I don't want to be a mom that wants to get fucked. No, not for me. Not me.
Every show, Ryan, every show, we just shake our head.
U of H and BYU have played 3 times. Okay, all in the last decade. 2014, you played on 9/11. You played 2013 when U of H was building the new stadium. You played at NRG, the Texan Stadium. That was a weird 44-43 game. The one in Provo, U of H was down 25-0 or something. And then you played during COVID in 2020. And BYU won all 3. 2014 and 2020 were at times competitive, and U of H kind of hung with BYU in 2020, and then they kind of pulled away in the 4th. There hasn't been any luck there. And so the MILFs would probably be the ones in Houston, at least until you get them in the Big 12. I can't believe I actually answered that. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
2014.
I have a reputation.
2014, did BYU have Taysom Hill? Who was the Houston quarterback in 2014?
His name is John O'Corn.
Yeah.
And
okay.
John O'Corn, 2 weeks after that, got booed so loudly in a home game that the head coach at the time, Tony Levine, who now owns a Chick-fil-A franchise, we're going to get weird over here too. So the head coach now owns a Chick-fil-A franchise. He was booed so loudly at home that U of H was forced to change quarterbacks to go to a guy named Greg Ward, who only went 13-1 and won the Peach Bowl the next year. Pretty okay. O'Corn transferred to Michigan, and in that crazy Michigan State game of like 2016 maybe, took a beating and has been kind of a jerk ever since, so I don't mind talking about this. So I don't remember if it was Taysom Hill or the other guy, and I'm blanking on his name. We went to Provo for that game. Me and my other podcast host, Brad Towns, spent a day in Provo, and then went to Vegas for the rest of it was a Thursday night game, and went to Vegas for the rest of the weekend. And, every part of that trip besides the game was amazing.
I'm sure. I was thinking of Greg Ward when in 2016, was he the starting quarterback when they beat Oklahoma?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Greg Ward was a great player at Houston.
Greg Ward, I think in a 10 or 11 game stretch, beat 3 top 10 teams. And where U of H was at the time, that's a huge accomplishment. And he was playing wide receiver up until about 3 weeks before he became the starting quarterback. I mean, it's an improbable story. He beats Florida State in the Peach Bowl. They open the next year, 11 a.m. game against OU at NRG. And quick aside, my little sister, who turned 40 about 2 months ago, had never seen U of H win a football game ever, or any game, basketball, baseball, football. And she'd been going to games for like 20 years. That was her first win. And so that one's like a personal one to me because it's about fucking time, Jamie. And so, and then in the 10th or the 11th game, they beat Louisville, who was top 5. Lamar Jackson, 11 sacks on Lamar Jackson that game. An insane game. So yeah, we like talking about Greg Ward. Our website actually invented a holiday called Greg Ward Day, and you can go into our archives. We write about it every year. It's the day that he got in as a reliever of John O'Corn. It was October 3rd of 2014. So next year we're going to have a decade of celebration on that. Greg Ward now reposts our tweets about it every year. So we're gonna like sit him down for 3 hours and go through that. Put that on the screen, y'all. You do your work and put that on the screen.
I'll put that on Bob. He's good editor.
Good job, Bob.
So Will the Thrill, our biggest fan, wants to ask, how hot is Dana Holgerson's seat right now on a scale of 1 to 10?
This is going to be the most disappointing answer ever. Like 4, like 5.
Yeah.
And that is an administration that is leery of making a change. But it's also, they haven't been as bad as everybody thought they were going to be. And that's like a Dana Holgerson hallmark, is that you think they're going to be bad, and they're a little better than what you thought. And so he kind of moves on another year. And he did that at West Virginia for a long time. And he got out before he got. And, you know, he pulled it out of his ass in 2021. They had a huge lead on Texas Tech and blew it in the first game. And there was a come to Jesus meeting. And they go and win, I think, 10 in a row. And, I mean, he's got that superpower. And, you know, you have to respect it. His seat is warm. Like, if
warm,
they just go to hell for the rest of the year, then all bets are off. Yeah. But if they kind of tweak along, and you've got 2 weeks ago, we had all said that Oklahoma State, total walkover, and now Oklahoma State is just nuts and out of their minds, and who knows what is going on there. But the last 2 weeks, you have Cincinnati and UCF, and you think you can beat one of those, maybe both of those. You have Baylor in November. Think you can win that? After Kansas State, the schedule gets a lot easier. And U of H is, for a year, we talked about U of H getting into the Big 12 and start to sustain injuries because you're just playing bigger guys. You know, it's not the same level as Temple and South Florida. And you haven't seen that yet. You know, full body cramp aside, there haven't been any real major issues. If that changes, everything is off the table. But that would just be another excuse for Dana. But I have said it since the preseason, his seat is not warm, no matter what everybody wants to think. And I think it's gotten less warm, even though they're 3-4 and 1-3 in the Big 12.
My follow-up, I'm just curious. I mean, let's just say at the end of the season, a change is made. Are there specific names that you would maybe hope from a hiring perspective that Houston would look at? I mean, there's 2 guys in Texas, and Kenny at Texas State, Jeff Traylor at UTSA, who are having great seasons. But I mean, are there like some short list names that if one of those guys got hired, you would be really happy with?
So I'm going to give you Kansas and Kansas State have totally changed my mind on this question. You can go hire the hotshot offensive coordinator, or you can go hire a guy that knows how to build a program and knows how to win. And I have always been hotshot coordinator guy, but I asked myself in the offseason, who would I think would be the guy? And I'm like, well, I like him and what he did, and I like what he did, and they've done it at multiple places. So it's not like you're catching fire. Jeff Traylor has done it with one quarterback for 7 years. Traylor hasn't been there 7 years, but Frank Harris has been starting for 7. the guys that I want are the guys that have built programs and can win. And so my thought is a different kind of coach than it would have been a year ago. As far as specific names, I maybe Brian Kelly would be good. Is Bill Snyder doing anything? That kind of vibe is where I'm feeling, just go break the bank. It doesn't matter. It's not my money.
Is there a Houston accent that Brian Kelly could fake for like a week and a half?
Brian Kelly, God bless him. They lead the country in scoring, right? That shouldn't happen. I went to LSU, and so this is a little personal to me on this one. They lead the country in scoring, and you just have no clue how it's happening. Now, you score 100 points on Army helps, but I don't know what he would do. He could probably the Astros are playing right now and getting beat in the 7th game. He could probably tuck in an Astros jersey. Ted Cruz has been doing that, and maybe he could just look like that. Like Ted Cruz or not, he lives right there. And I don't think he's seen a home team win a game in a sport this entire year. The Astros, A&M, he probably was at the U of H game Saturday. I mean, it just has to be, right? So maybe he could do a Ted Cruz thing. I can't believe I just talked politics. Y'all have got me so backwards right now.
Maybe the teams will start winning if he goes to Cancun again.
There you go. Okay, I didn't talk politics.
You're good. You're good. Now that we have, so we're going to pivot to basketball just for a brief second here. This question again comes from our biggest fan, Will the Thrill. Now that we have the Big 12 preseason rankings, how do you think U of H will fare in their first season in the league on the hoop side of things? Coming off of a year where you were ranked number 1 for a good chunk of the year, obviously a 1 seed in the tournament. Just tell us what you think about how they're going to do this year in the Big 12.
It's hard to pivot from Dana Holgerson to Kelvin Sampson because you go from wannabe winner to just certified badass winner. Kelvin Sampson, he gives us more access to his program than any coach I've ever been around in my entire life. I've been doing this in one way or another for 25 years. And it's just confidence. And the guy's a winner, and he will beat you any way you give him. And it can be ugly. And it can be all right, this is kind of fun. But I think there's going to be some growing pains. You've got a lot of young guys on this team, and you're guard heavy. You're gonna be really good at the guard spot all the way to the 3, 4, and 5. The 4, Juwan Roberts has been there for 5 years. He knows what he's doing, but he's played the 5, and now he's going back to the 4, which is more natural. And you're gonna have young guys like freshmen, sophomores at the 5. And can those guys take the bodying that they're gonna get in the Big 12, twice a week? And that's really where this season's going to come down to. Kelvin will get you the details. He'll get the details right. He will do all the little things right. But do you have the size inside to finish off games?
Let me get into back to football. I mean,
okay.
I don't like asking these questions because,
I like when somebody says, I don't like asking this, but
it's just silly. I mean, people don't go to games for their own personal reasons or whatever, but he asked, game attendance has been brought up quite a bit as it relates to Houston football. Is that because there's more exciting things to do in Houston or a result of the down season this year?
Well, it's not a result of the down season. If you want to call it more things to do, okay. But, I mean, Houston is an event town. And it's not we'll be there every game kind of town, if you're doing something exciting or there's a big event, Texas was a perfect example. That was an event, and it was basically a sellout. It was a lot of UT people, but that's just how it goes in this town. The Astros are sold out completely at Minute Maid right now, and that is an event, but it's been an event for years. U of H basketball sells out. It's not a huge arena by Big 12 standards, but the attendance for the last 2 years has been surprising. Like, I can't believe there's this many people. The American had a terrible TV contract where you play a ton of 6 o'clock weekday games. Well, in the city of Houston, you have to leave at 4 o'clock to get somewhere at 6. It's just not working out. And so it would be late arriving crowds, but they get there. And it can happen, but it's not because of the down year. It's just what it is. And U of H fans have learned to just don't even care about the attendance thing. Some will get mad, but it's like, you've heard this for 50 years. Since right after the Astrodome opened, U of H played there. And once that newness worn off, it's kind of been the same way. And that's okay. Who cares? If you beat somebody and you only have 18,000 people there, you still beat them. If you only have 30,000 people there, you still beat them.
Yeah, that's completely fair. One of our last questions that we have. So when you joined the Big 12 a couple years ago, you knew it was you, 3 other teams, but now the Big 12, especially starting next year, is going to take even bigger change with the addition of the 4 schools from the Pac-12. What are some thoughts on the new Big 12? I mean, having these 4 schools join next year, the 3 additional schools that you joined with, and looking kind of long term, how do you feel Houston is setting themselves up for success in this new iteration of the conference?
So the first part is I'm pretty excited. I think this gives you stability, and it gives you certainly none of the schools that are in the current Big 12 except BYU, I guess, but have a huge history with these Western schools. And this is going to be all new, and it's going to be kind of fun. I think the Arizona schools are going to be interesting. Colorado, whatever. Kansas State obviously has that history with them in the Big 8. Utah, they seem so happy to be here. All of their fans so happy that I think that everyone is going to relish beating them if they can. Kyle Whittingham's really good. The second half of that question, which I totally forgot, and I apologize, but I agree.
Would you say how is Houston setting themselves up for success? Yeah.
So here's the big issue with that is with 16 schools, how do you divide it? Is it 2 divisions? Is it pods? If Houston is bunched with Baylor and Texas Tech and TCU, that puts U of H in a certain direction and gives you a certain line on recruits. But if you are bunched with UCF and West Virginia and Cincinnati in this weird amalgamation of a Southeastern, that's basically the American to U of H people. Like, there's no connection to those schools. So if it goes to pods and you're with that Eastern Cincinnati, West Virginia thing, how do you develop rivalries all the way to Morgantown, all the way to Orlando, all the way to Cincinnati? You've been in the league with Cincinnati for 20 years or so, and there's no rivalry. UCF, there's no rivalry. West Virginia is only interesting because of the Dana Holgerson dynamic, but I don't think anybody really cares about that long term. But if you can situate yourself where you're with some Texas schools and even going to Arizona, and maybe a Southwestern kind of, that can work. With basketball, it's going to work as long as you have Kelvin and then his son Kellen will be the next head coach. It's probably going to work for at least the next 10 years. But football, you really need, the whole point of the Big 12 is to compete with the people you see at work every day, the people you see at church, golf course, whatever. And if they take that from you as soon as you get into the Big 12, then it kind of defeats a lot of the purpose.
What I really hope ends up happening is that we go more to that protected rivalries route where you don't necessarily have a pod per se, but Houston would get paired up with Texas Tech and Baylor, but maybe not necessarily a third team potentially. Yeah. And then you end up conglomerating a schedule based on a ton of other different factors that people way smarter than me would put together. But that's my hope, because then at least you can protect those rivalries that are the most important. I selfishly don't want to see Iowa State end up in a pod with Cincinnati, UCF, and West Virginia, because that's another thing that's been floated is,
that's something that U of H would want.
Houston, basically. No, yeah, because it's either you keep Houston with the Texas schools or you move Iowa State away.
Yep.
And then Armageddon, the longest continuously played rivalry game in college football right now, ends up being a thing anymore, which would be really, really disappointing to see, especially with the way the Big 12 has gone to kind of go out and grab some of those schools that have shared history, like Arizona State, that type of thing. But
yeah, so the thing with this is Iowa State and UCF is a natural rivalry for me personally. I think that Ames and Orlando are perfect for each other, and that should be where the conference focuses. I think Brett Yarmark is a home run, and everything he does just turns to gold. But there have been a couple little things that you're like, well, that don't make any sense. And the fight that you're going to have for this, how you divvy schools up, and a lot of it's going to be ESPN and Fox. And so if you divvy them up from a Houston perspective, if you put them in that weird pod, or if your protected rivalries are UCF and Baylor, I mean, that doesn't make a sense from a U of H perspective. But, the four Western schools are probably going to band together in their voting. You got to figure Iowa State and Kansas State, and probably Oklahoma State are going to kind of band together in their voting. So, and will the Texas schools do that? And so there's a reason we haven't found out all this yet, because I mean, it's clear they're still kind of jockeying, and they put this date out for a schedule release. We'll see if that happens. Last year it was 2 months late, and
That was so Texas didn't have to leave the state of Texas for the latter, for basically the entirety of the season. And so Oklahoma could get the biggest cupcake schedule they could possibly try to get. But I mean, the last thing we have is just give us your score prediction, any other predictions you have for the game, and then feel free to plug whatever you want.
I am not a score prediction guy. And with this U of H team, where they're at, coming off these two emotional wins, who knows what team's showing up. And, with how this is going, 11 a.m., it's homecoming. It's weird weather is what it looks like. I mean, Manhattan's had great weather for a little while, and now you're going to bring this shit to town when I get there. I don't like that. I take that personally. But I don't know what U of H team is going to show up. I think there's a possibility, but at this point, you got to show me, right? And my question to y'all is, where do I need to go? What do I need to eat in Manhattan? If you tell me Outback, that's fine, but I would like a little bit,
there's
local.
There's a great place. It's called Olive Garden. Unlimited breadsticks.
Have you ever
Olive
heard
with an O?
Have you ever heard of eating good in the neighborhood?
We've got a guy with an Applebee's NIL deal. It's fantastic. No, I mean, by all means, I'll give some of my recommendations. If you want a breakfast brunch spot, go to the Chef. It's essentially famous now because there's an HBO show called Somebody Somewhere that they go to the Chef basically every morning in that. So fantastic place for brunch. I would recommend So Long Saloon for probably the best burgers in maybe the state of Kansas. I would go out on that limb. And my favorite other
Bourbon
spot,
and Baker. Bourbon and
probably
Baker.
be Bourbon and Baker. That's a great spot. It's like small plate type of thing.
On points.
And then Auntie Mae's or Auntie Mae's for a bar to go to. It's been there since Prohibition. It was a speakeasy, and it's been continuously operating since.
And
all right. And
if you go
Olive
to-
Garden.
And Olive Garden. And if you go to So Long, you also, with a burger, there's a couple things. You got to get a Nancy. So it's basically a pie.
All right, I'm being set up.
No.
There's
I
no
swear.
way that you go get a Nancy, a little girl
I
burger.
swear. No.
It's a drink.
It's a drink. It's a pineapple
Oh,
drink.
okay. All right.
But it's probably one of the most famous things. People come back and just slam Nancy's. Oh, I didn't even catch that. I said
MILF,
that.
Cougar. Yeah, got it. Slamming Nancy's.
They drink a lot of Nancy's. And then the raspberry black bean dip there is really good. And then if you get some time before the game, I can reach out to you on Twitter, but you should stop by. I have a tailgate that I do. So if you're there early and you want to stop by, it would be great to have you and any Houston fans come.
One of the few bonuses of being media is that I get to escape that 40-degree rainy weather and go sit inside. And probably. But yeah, I'll stop by. That's fine. That's good.
I mean, that's completely fair.
I'm going to slam some Nancy's the night before, and we'll just see what kind of shape I'm in.
Yeah, I'll have Fireball or, a liquid IV situation if you need that too. So.
Right.
Ryan,
and plug GoCoogs.com.
Yeah,
GoCoogs.com. And GoCoogs1 on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever else ones they have. We got that. We write a lot. We write every day, 2 stories, 3 stories, 8 stories a day. We do some video, a lot of player content. We do some NIL stuff. And our thing is, let's just get players in unique situations and have them talk and just kind of screw with them. And we pay them for it. And so it's been a lot of fun. We do it a lot more with basketball than football. So we're ramping that up this week. First exhibition is this weekend, is Saturday right after the football game. So yeah, GoCoogs.com, 2 O's, not 1. Slamming Nancy's with Ryan and Brad.
Slamming Nancy.
Come check it out.
Well, Ryan, we appreciate having you on, man. It was a pleasure hearing
y'all a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's the goal. We're trying to have fun and get people who know what they're talking about from the other team to tell us. Give us.
Has that worked out good or not? Yeah, no.
It's working out well enough.
This one's gonna be fun.
This is
making
been great.
Making big checks.
All right.
But we'll go ahead and end it here in a moment. But for all of us here at Cocaine Willie, thank you for listening to the show on your podcast feeds or watching us on YouTube. Do us a favor, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcast, leave us a 5-star rating for the show. And if you're watching on YouTube, give us a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Even if you're not a K-State fan, if you're a Houston fan or another Big 12 fan that's listening in, follow the show.
Really should.
Yeah, you should. You should. Follow the show on Twitter or Instagram, or follow us individually. I am at Bob Trollsby. Chef is at Chef Andre Napier, and Fireball Matt is at Matt Marchesini. Chef.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug, baby.
We are all Coke and no joke. Wildcat country.
Let's fucking ride, baby.
Right.
Let's ride.